Okay, good morning everybody, and welcome to the next in our series of bite-sized breakfast briefings. These webinars are 20-minute high-level summaries of some of the key issues and challenges facing those involved in sustainability data. This week we're going to be talking about how software drives better sustainability reporting. With so much data out there and with reporting requirements changing almost daily, does a software system really help with better reporting? Before we start, I wanted to go through a bit of housekeeping. There will be some time for questions at the end, so if you do have any, please use the chat dialogue. It should be on the right-hand side of the screen, and we will try and answer those questions for you. We are also recording this webinar, and we'll make it available to you on our YouTube channel. Okay, Joe, over to you.
Thanks very much, Roy. So, good morning, everybody. And as Roy said, welcome to another bite-sized breakfast briefing, which when we named, we didn't realize we'd have to say it quite so often. Before we start talking about the subject today, we're going to do a very quick piece for anyone who doesn't know who we are, on who we are. So SustainIt are a sustainability data consultancy. We have been around for 10 years now, this is our 10th year, I guess more accurately, and we help our clients with understanding, controlling and effectively using their sustainability data. And that can be as simple as doing some analysis work, understanding what kind of information they have access to, or when we get to some of, should we say, the more complex challenges, and obviously you can see from this slide we do work with some pretty interesting companies. It becomes about finding the right way to collect, control, manage, report, use that sustainability data. There's so many sustainability data metrics out there. There's so much requirement for that data to be used. It's a moving challenge that our clients face on a daily basis. 14 million tons of CO2 monitored through systems that we assist our clients with is quite a nice number to have. Which, by the way, if anyone is interested, is actually the carbon footprint of the state of New York for a year. The fact I work these things out tells you something about me, I think. So, I think everyone's seen this statement. I've heard it so many times talking about sustainability, talking about data, talking about it. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Which is, I think, true. I think it lacks a certain ambition to it, but it is very true. But what we're going to talk about today instead is if you can't measure it, you definitely can't report it. And I think this is one of the things. Sustainability data is great, but it's then got to be usable. It's got to be something that you can have access to, that you can manipulate so that it feeds whatever reports you need it to feed. And those can be simple reports such as internal numbers on energy, or it can be more complex things like GRI and the Dow Jones Sustainability Index and the CDP reporting, which obviously come out year by year and have to be fed. So if you can't measure it, you definitely can't report it. So the obvious thing is, what are the choices? And we should probably get this out of the way because it is a real choice. Next up, there's no denying that for a lot of companies, this is the first port of call for sustainability data management, and I'm not going to say that it shouldn't be. We work with some clients who are dizzying in size that still use Excel to manage and report data, so it's definitely an option, but we'll talk a little bit about that. But there are other options, and I just grabbed these because they are some of the options out there. They are certainly not all of the options out there. The number of sustainability softwares continues to grow, and the functionality offered by these sustainability software options continues to grow. It's a fast-moving market. For the most part, it is led by companies who are focused on sustainability or on corporate social responsibility data. For the most part, they are companies that are driven by innovation and a real desire to succeed in this area, which means that new functionality comes out when it's needed and when the market wants it. But it does mean that even the softwares are moving fast. So keeping a track of everything can be an interesting challenge. It's worth highlighting that one of the things that we have, certainly I think in our favor at SustainIt, is we are an independent sustainability data consultancy. We have technical and service partnerships with a bunch of these software houses, but we don't have dedicated sales channels with them. We don't have any agreements with these guys that would mean that there is a benefit to us recommending one over another. So if you are going to talk to us about these things, and obviously we'd love you to talk to us about these kind of things, then any advice we give you isn't weighted by this software or that software. It is genuine independent advice, and that's obviously something that we think is very important. So we'll go back a step and we'll ask the question, is Excel the right choice? The honest answer is, it sometimes is. And this goes straight into the second issue. It does have the advantage of kind of being free. I mean, unless you're on Lotus Notes, then you've got Microsoft Office, which means you've got Excel, which means you've got something that will allow you to collect numbers, aggregate them, create graphical outputs and graphs and pie charts and pyramids and whatever else you want. You do have a tool that will allow you to do those things. And certainly you can manage the volume of data. I think, as I've highlighted, we have got clients out there who have systems in place that they just grab the numbers, put them into Excel, and then they use that to drive their reporting. And we talk, there are companies within the FTSE 250 that use nothing but Excel for their sustainability data management. It's an option, not necessarily the best option, but they are doing it. It can do it. If Excel is your only choice, then you shouldn't discount it. So why should you look elsewhere? I think this is an important one. CSR software, sustainability software, EHS software, ESG software, you can call it what you like. It isn't just about data management. It isn't just about grabbing numbers and doing stuff to them. It's also about the ownership of those numbers. It's about being able to set up distributed users so that you've got individual sites responsible for entering their own data, responsible for checking it, submitting it, and then answerable when it comes back and, well, hang on, this number looks wrong, or you haven't submitted this information. There is more to CSR software than just crunching numbers. There's also the fact that an increasing amount of sustainability data isn't numbers, and Excel suddenly doesn't do so well. When you've got projects and you need to talk about outcomes and analysis and you need text-based information, then the system won't handle that well. And then before we even get into things like audits and supply chain data, where again you're dealing with, I guess, non-aligned data sets, CSR software gives you the opportunity to control much more than Excel what people are entering, how they are entering it, when they're entering it. And those are challenges that I think anyone who's grabbing sustainability data from across an organization face. It's a fair point, I think, in a specialist field. Specialist options are going to be more powerful. They're going to be able to do more. Obvious examples include things like CO2 calculations. There are systems now which have dedicated GHG calculation suites, which will look at the location of sites, look at the sourcing of the energy, and help you calculate GHG, rather than it all being done by hand. Isn't quite true, because you're not going to be doing it by hand, but still, rather than it being done manually, it can be done automatically. And indeed, some systems come with a consultancy piece as a part of them, so that the entire greenhouse gas calculation is handled by an expert consultant. Great. It completely takes it off your hands. The same, as I said, with things like audit data. When you need to be able to set up workflows and track actions and distribute those actions, all that automation can be done by a specialist option. And then the last one is probably the obvious one. Yeah. Whilst the free options often are good, they're not often the best choice. I mean, it sometimes is the case, but I think I don't tell anyone anything they don't know when I say that. So what are the main advantages? As we said, distributed user management, integrated calculations and outputs, and the ability to manage complexity. And all of those are things I think that you will see you get a much better piece of functionality when you look at dedicated software than when you look at using something like Excel. I should say I do know people who use Lotus Notes, and so there is an option within that as well. But there are certainly choices. Certainly within dedicated software, you will get the ability to do a lot of this a lot more easily. So that's kind of high level this is what the software does. But how does that help with reporting? What are the things that reporting gets from dedicated software? So we'll fly through these, I think. So specialist functionality, expansive graphic interpretation, and reporting standards templates. So what do I mean by these? Specialist functionality. I know from experience, and I'm sure some of you do too, that within an organization, the organization structure can be one or two or three or four different things depending on what your audience is, depending on who you're talking to. So being able to have several different reporting boundaries within a system so that you know, for example, that, oh, hang on, sorry, that this report is only interested in the manufacturing side. Oh, sorry, this report is only interested in sites that are in Europe and the Middle East. Being able to define those reporting boundaries within the system gives you the ability to not just report data based on those, but also to set up roles, set up responsibilities, and set up data ownership in accordance to those. But obviously for reporting as well, it's massively important. You can split data as you need to when you need it, rather than it being a case of, okay, someone needs this report, so I need to grab this data, this data, this. No, that boundary has been set up. This is the report I need. You can manage the emission factors, as we've talked about already. Being able to easily manage emission factors is a huge piece of work. Now, with scope 2 emissions changing as they are thanks to the well-to-tank guidelines that came from DEFRA 2 years ago, and now the changes with location and market-based emissions that came from the World Resource Institute, those are two entirely new ways of calculating your emissions. If you've got a system that will allow you to set up emission factor sets, then create the calculations based off those without a painful experience, being, without starting from zero again, then you're much further ahead of the game, and you can then report against each of these different frameworks, still using the same core data, still using the same functionality, and without doubling or tripling your workload when it happens. Very important, I think. And advanced organization structures, as we've talked about, I know companies who have 3 or 4 different axes structure. So being able to use a system that will allow you to set those up, that will allow you to understand that you need to report in different ways and also in different layers. I mean, we've got organizations we work with who've got 8 or 9 layers of organizational structure. That's before we get into axes. Being able to have that within the system allows you to enter data at different levels, allows you to consolidate the data at different levels, and all of these things happen with a reasonable amount of automation within a dedicated system. I don't think they do in a spreadsheet. Expansive graphic interpretation. There's always titles for slides that I write and I think that looks good, and then I have to read it out, and this I think is one of them. Expansive graphic interpretation. Okay. Dedicated dashboards. One of the things I will often talk about extensively if you ever have a meeting with me, or if we ever start talking about sustainability data, is the importance of communicating the information that you're collecting. There is so much data gathered, there is so much information available that if you are not able to communicate it effectively, it becomes almost a black hole that people throw numbers into but never see anything coming out of. Dedicated dashboards is a great way of helping make sure you communicate data. You can make sure that every user who logs into the system, one of the first things they see is, this is what your data is driving. These are the corporate targets. This is our performance for this year or for the last 4 years against those corporate targets. This is how the corporate target looks for the sites you are interested in. This is how your data looks. Giving people that kind of information instantly creates data ownership. They feel like they're involved. They are part of the data, and that, I think, is a great thing. There we go. Export into all kinds of formats. I mean, I know of systems that will export into every part of the Office suite, into HTML, into dedicated emails. Great. And most of the systems will do at least some, if not all of that. Being able to throw this data out into formats that is usable is great. But there's also the fact you can split it out into XML or CSV files, which means you can then start to integrate it into other systems. You can start to push that data into business information tool so that you can start to pull in as well the financial data and HR information. The systems are designed with integration in mind at both ends. So data coming in from automated meters or from exports from other companies or from suppliers can go in, but data going out can integrate with visualization tools and reporting functionalities, things. Yeah, there's an awful lot there that will allow you to push data into formats and into systems you need it to. And cookie cutter reproduction. When you finally get the report you want and you create it, that's great. But a month, 3 months, or a year later, you need to be able to create the same report. And I know that if you're using spreadsheets, if you're using SharePoint or something like that, then there's going to be a certain amount of crossing fingers when you go, okay, well, all the data for next year is in. Does it still all work? You have to check the relationships work. You have to make sure that none of the macros have been broken, or the pivot charts or the columns. There's always that kind of thing. If you set up a report within a system, if you've got it working as you want, the graphics are there, you've got the space of the text, you've got all the numbers in the place, then within the dedicated system, you come to the next time and say, actually, what I want now is the same report, but for this reporting period, go. And it really can be as simple as that, honestly. Being able to spit it out time after time after time, in terms of dashboards, in terms of graphics, in terms of pie charts, once you go through the effort of creating something that your stakeholders are happy with, it's important to be able to reproduce that, and that's one of the things that software gives you the ability to do. And then reporting standards templates. I've got a slide somewhere, and it's not in this presentation, that talks about the number of frameworks that are out there, and I can rattle off. You've got DJSI, SASB, you've got GRI, there's EcoVadis, there's CDP, and obviously the WDP, which is now back in. There's SEDEX if you're a supplier, there's FTSE for Good, and the list goes on and goes on and goes on, and it's growing, which is great. But being able to report against those can become a major part of your job, especially if you are supplying a company that expects you to report against those standards. And so being able to take the same core data, cut it appropriately, for want of a better term, and put it into a format that that reporting standard requires can be a huge time saver. And the crossover is huge. I mean, so much so I think that GRI and CDP have actually done a webinar together talking about the crossover between them. But it's the same. If you're going to start looking at SASB, the crossover with GRI is significant. If you're going to look at SEDEX and EcoVadis, then there's a big crossover there. And Dow Jones Sustainability Index, pretty much everything in there can be put into a GRI report as well. There is that crossover. Being able to use the same core data, change it slightly, and still meet a standard saves you time, saves you effort. Makes an awful lot of sense. You get to minimize the maths involved. I remember talking to one of our clients who were, this is a couple of years back, who were determined they were going to report against GRI, and these were the metrics, and they came back with, okay, well, we're going to use this one because this is easy, and it was just the amount of carbon involved. And I said, oh, that's great, and you're right, it's reasonably easy, but that single high-level KPI will require data from these 10 different sources. And his eyes are like, okay. And obviously the rest of that sentence is, and so will all the other GRI high-level indicators. The fact is, once you've got the system set up to consolidate data, to bring together the groups into the sections you need, then it's done the once. And you don't have to do it again, you don't have to do it again, you don't have to do it again. And when you've got things like automated calculations that are based on turnover, or based on production volumes, or based on headcount, or based on capital, so those calculations are done for you in a system rather than done by you in Excel each time you have to submit a report. And it simplifies submission. There are quite a few of these softwares now that have partnerships with the frameworks, and so they will have within their reporting suite a button that says GRI report, and it will spit it out. Obviously, there's a certain amount that has to be entered manually. There's mission statements and text and all that kind of stuff that your system won't have in it. You will have to put those in, but there'll be big boxes that say, put this bit of information in here, type it out, and it's done. It's a great way of simplifying the process of submission. So, final thoughts. We are nearly finished. Excel isn't the worst choice, but it certainly isn't the best choice. I think this is important. We've not really talked about this. I saw a study that said that nearly a third of software functionality isn't used. So if you're buying software, don't buy it because something looks shiny or you think, oh, well, that's cool, and we'll work out how to use it later. Buy the software that has the functionality you need. If you're tight for budget, then I think this is a great way of making sure you're not spending money you don't need to. Yeah. And as we said, big data can flow in two directions. Make sure that the data isn't just going into a black hole. Make sure it's getting out there to stakeholders, to data suppliers, to reporting frameworks, to your board. Make sure you're using the data. Lastly, before we get to questions, and remember, you can ask questions if you want to. Something we put out there this year is Go Marketwise. It's gomarketwise.com. It's a website. And if you're starting to think about sustainability data options, it's a great way to start. It asks you a few questions about the size of your company and the budget you have. It asks you a few questions about what kind of data you want to collect and how you're going to collect it. And that's it. And it will come back with some ideas. They'll be matched based on your questions, and they will be there to help you understand that the data you have and the requirements you have can be matched against suitable software. There are options out there. There are an awful lot of them that do an awful lot of what people need. I think one of the things that certainly I found in sustainability software is that because there are so many companies out there, because there's so much being done in terms of innovation, a lot of these softwares will match what you need. It's just about finding them. And I think Go Marketwise is a great way of starting to look at what kind of options will suit you. And as we said, it's free. I think a very important thing about it. There we go. Okay. So I wanted to get on to questions now. I think that Roy was going to help me with this. Roy, are you there? Apparently Roy has lost his audio, so I'm a little bit on my own. So if you just bear with me, everybody, I will have a look through the questions. So what we got here? Okay, so we're running a little bit late. We'll only do a couple, I think. So what if we're reporting against GRI or ESOS software? Okay, so sorry, I'm reading the question to myself. So what if we are reporting against GRI or ESOS? Will software handle automatic reporting, and which ones will handle automatic reporting? So as I said, one of the important things about these softwares is that they will integrate with reporting standards. Now there's almost two levels of this. One is that softwares will have arrangements or will have partnerships with software houses, so that when you look at their website, there'll be seals from GRI or ESOS or from Dow Jones. Well, ESOS not really, it's a government thing, but you will be little marks that show they will do this. But really that's only part of the story. The other thing is that if you know the report format you want, and if you're really clear about that, and if you build that within whatever system you have reporting functionality, then there's nothing to stop you churning that out time after time after time. And if if you've got the time, or if as part of the deployment project you get the reporting templates that align with these reporting standards built, then that gets you there as well. It's not necessary for the software to have a partnership seal of approval from these frameworks for it to be able to report against these frameworks. So it's an important thing. And in terms of automatic reporting, some of them will, some of them won't. As I said, it's such a big list, I don't want to go through all of them. As you start to look at softwares, you'll find out which ones will do automated distribution or will do automatic report generation. There we go. I hope that helps. Okay, so we get our energy data managed by an energy company. How would software help with that? It's a good question. Most energy management companies will give you data that you want in the format that they will have agreed with you, which is great. but then that doesn't necessarily align with how you want to use that data beyond the obvious energy management. As I said, electricity is the obvious example, and reporting on it has changed twice in the last 3 years, depending on which framework you use. So being able to manipulate that data effectively is an important piece of the puzzle. The fact is that these systems, as I said, will do automated outputs, but they'll also do automated inputs. So being able to integrate that data into your system, then being able to apply greenhouse gas emissions to it, apply reporting boundaries that you need to it, and then bring it out as a graphic output, as an automated Excel export that can go into a report, means that not only are you getting the energy data you want, and obviously I would imagine if we're talking about it being a managed solution, we're talking about very granular data, but you can also then manipulate that, aggregate it the way you want, so that individual meters at a site become one number that you can look at and then drill into if you need to. But you can also then get it out as you need to. Hopefully that helps. Okay, I'm just looking at the time, so we've got really not much left. We were supposed to be 20 minutes and we're definitely over that. So I am going to wrap it up. I want to say thank you very much to everyone. I want to say thank you to Roy, and who is having a bit of a nightmare with technology at the moment. I want to say thank you to you all. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, then please let us know. If you'd like to talk to us further about the kind of challenges you're facing with sustainability data, then obviously we'd be very happy to do that. And if you have any questions at all about how reporting works, then please get in touch. And don't forget about Go Marketwise. It is there to be used. It's a free tool. It will help you work out what kind of options will fit with what you're looking for. Thank you very much. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll be back, I think, next month to talk about sustainability, data transformation, and communication. All good fun. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely day. Goodbye.